One of the many nightmares of public speaking is having a bored audience. It happens to everyone, but it doesn't make it any less worrisome. Sometimes an audience is obviously bored, and other times you just get the feeling that they're not enjoying your talk. Hi, I'm Yannick from speakandconquer.com, and here are 16 secret ways of how to speak to a bored audience. How to speak to a bored audience using body language. Imagine watching a movie where nobody moved and no one had any facial expressions. That would be incredibly boring. Unfortunately, that's how a lot of speakers behave when they step into the spotlight, and as a result, that's how you get bored audiences. Using your body and face to express important aspects of your speech or presentation helps keep audiences engaged. It's good advice, but it's advice that often confuses people who aren't used to behaving that way. I try to explain it as if you were an actor on stage. You're playing a part. You need to use your body to show your audience something interesting. Use your body to emphasize a point or direct attention. Now, let's take a look at some body language related tips. Number 1. Move around the stage to grab attention. The most obvious way to use your body in a speech or presentation is to simply walk from one point to another. I mean this figuratively and literally. When changing points in your presentation or moving onto a new subtopic, begin slowly walking to a new spot on your stage. It's a not-so-subtle visual reminder that you're moving on to a new subject. Walking is best done slowly and during your segue. Take deliberate steps, emphasizing important words or phrases with another one. You can also use large body movements and changes of location during long stretches of explanations or during stories. This keeps the audience's eyes on you, emphasizing certain points by appearing to move to a new location, then stopping in your tracks is one way to show a problem that needs to be solved, for example. Number 2. Use your hands. If space is limited, or you feel you've walked around enough, you could still use your body to speak to your audience. The best way to do so is using your hands. Don't take this to mean you should flop them around like a crazy bird. Your movements should be smooth, comforting, natural. Or maybe not. It's okay to use some sudden hand motions in exciting parts or shocking parts. However, you don't want to make a habit of this. Too many quick or sudden movements can be distracting and annoying. It can also imply you're uncomfortable. For some visual tips, try watching videos of professional magicians. They have the best hand movements in any spectator event. You may not be performing magic tricks at your next event, but you can learn a lot about fluid hand motions by watching the pros in action. I've made a thorough tutorial which talks about what to do with your hands during a speech. You'll find the link in the description of this video. Number 3. Exaggerate facial expressions. For the people in the front few rows, your face is going to tell more of the story than your words and body can do alone. When you learn to properly exaggerate your expressions, people even farther back can reap those benefits too. There is a fine line between appropriate exaggeration and becoming a laughingstock. Too much emphasis or exaggeration and you'll lose credibility. Not enough and your audience will get lost. Look to live plays or recordings of plays to see this in action. Stage actors are trained to reach everybody in the theater, even in the nosebleed seats. Watch how they use exaggerated facial expressions, often holding them just a second or two longer than natural to help emphasize. They also slowly turn to be sure everyone gets a chance to see. Number 4. Be animated to keep attendees interested. Being animated doesn't mean being obnoxious or flamboyant. It means you should find a balance between standing perfectly still and adding overall movement to your speech. Animated speeches include hands, body, and facial expressions. They should work together to give an overall emphasis or to indicate movement within the presentation, for example. Try to keep your actions natural but enhanced. This takes some practice, so grab your video camera and watch yourself. How to speak to a bored audience using your voice. Body language is just one important aspect to keep audiences engaged. Yet, you can be animated and active all day long, but if your voice is drab and boring, you'll still lose your audience's attention. Here's how to use your voice to keep the audience engaged. Number 5. Use emotional inflection to capture listeners. I remember listening to my middle school history teacher drone on and on about politics in other countries. It was excruciating to sit through. I'd have rather spent time at the dentist than listen to one more of his speeches. The issue wasn't the topic of his speeches, it was his tone. He was so monotone and lifeless, I felt like I could fall asleep at any moment. Because of his speaking habits, I dreaded every long second in that class. I vowed to never speak like that man, and you should too. Use inflections during emotional parts of your presentation. Emotions can be anything from excitement to sadness to shock, and anything in between. Emotional inflection can be used in conjugation with animated movements to help drive the point home and get audiences in the right mood. Number 6. Modulate your volume. A subtle way to keep an audience engrossed is to change your volume. You can go 2 ways with this. First, you can use appropriate modulation. What I mean by this is that you raise your voice at an expected moment. During an exciting story, for example, this will keep audiences engaged because you're behaving as they expect. It's a way to keep them comfortable too. Second, you can choose to use unexpected voice modulation. For example, you could become quiet during an exciting moment, leaning in and encouraging the audience to lean in close too. This expected behavior will grab their attention and show them this is not an ordinary presentation. You're not an ordinary speaker. But why stop with these 2 methods? Mix them up. Change your tone and volume to keep your attendees on the edge of their seats. Number 7. Change the pace of your words. There should always be a flow in your speeches. You need a specific cadence to your words to help them ring true. However, this can backfire in a bad way if you're not mindful. This is especially imperative information for longer speeches. The longer you talk, the more likely you'll bore your audience. To prevent the hypnotic nature of perfectly paced speeches, change your cadence. Sometimes you should be speaking at a normal conversational pace. Others, you should go quickly, making your words move in fast succession. Use smaller words during these parts, so it can be more engaging. Use slower pacing for other parts, using longer words and perhaps drawing out a few pauses for emphasis. There is no perfect pace, so be sure to mix it up and keep changing as you go along. Entertaining speech pointers for bored audiences. Sometimes boredom is unavoidable. You can do everything right and your audience may still be bored to tears. Usually, these are people who aren't at your speech voluntarily. They don't want to be there, and so they've walked in with the assumption they'll be bored to death. It'll be tough, but you can still win these people over. How? Let's take a look at some tips I have for you. Number 8. Shock the audience. If you anticipate the audience may be bored right from the start, plan to begin your speech with something shocking. This can be an outlandish announcement that you later debunk as part of your explanation. It can be a piece of incredible industry news that most people don't know yet. It can be pure speculation or a thought experiment. Honestly, this shocking element can be just about anything as long as you can work it into your speech. Just be sure it's relevant to your topic and to the industry you're speaking about. Number 9. Hint at something incredible. Humans are naturally curious beings. If you drop a hint early in your presentation that implies you'll be revealing something amazing later, your audience will be curious and may perk up. Keep dropping hints as you go through your speech to keep reeling them in. Just be sure the incredible thing at the end is really worth their time. Nothing is more anger-inducing during a speech than empty promises. Number 10. Ask questions. Bored audiences disengage fairly quickly. You could often see it happening. If you do notice this, try to ask a question. Ask anything that will get people's attention. You're feeding off the natural human desire to be seen and heard. Something as simple as asking for a show of hands can keep people engaged. It shows that you, the speaker, acknowledge the audience and their opinions. It makes the listeners feel like a part of the presentation instead of just spectators. Number 11. Go off script. This is pretty basic advice, but it's good enough that I want to repeat it here. Too many people stick too closely to their speech notes. It's robotic and unnatural. Don't be afraid to go off script if the audience seems to be losing interest in your planned route. This is also helpful if your audience is particularly interested in one aspect but loses interest when you change topics. Find a way to circle back around to the thing that grabbed their attention. Even better if you can integrate the perceived boring part into the exciting one. Number 12. Tell a story, even if it's not true. There is a saying that goes, learn by example. Another saying goes, make a point, tell a story. It means that you should learn a lesson based on someone else's experience, whether good or bad. In the case of speeches and presentations for bored audiences, you could use a story to pull them back in. The story doesn't have to be true, but it's helpful if you present it as such. If it isn't true, it's always best to let them know at the end that it wasn't. That way, they don't feel duped. Just let them know you wanted to get their attention by telling a story that could have happened. This is particularly useful for people selling products or services, but it can work for many industries. Number 13. Begin with a problem. Bored people need something to do. Give them a problem to solve and they may brighten right up. This tip can go along with the storytelling or the shocking tip too. Be creative. When you begin your speech with a problem, you're telling people why they should listen in the first place. You're also giving their brains something to do in the background. Don't solve the problem right away. Hint at the answer coming later, but keep pulling back to it so the audience remembers why they're listening. To slide or not to slide? I hear a lot of questions regarding the use of slides during presentations and speeches. There are good and bad points to using them, but we won't cover those in this article. Sometimes slides are unavoidable. Right now, I want to discuss how to speak to a bored audience when you have to use slides. Number 14. Don't read from the slides. The number one way to bore an audience with slides is to read them word for word. Your audience can read just fine on its own. There is no reason to read the slides for them. It's insulting, boring, and repetitive. Your listeners will zone out pretty quickly this way. Number 15. Paraphrase. Since you can't read the slides, what should you do? Simple. Just paraphrase what the slide says. To keep an audience from dropping into boredom, paraphrase the slides in an interesting way. If you're feeling cheeky, paraphrase them in rhyme. If you don't have that kind of levity available for your topic, you can paraphrase in simple industry lingo instead. There are as many ways to restate a slide as there are topics, so just use your imagination. Number 16. Use Easter eggs. I don't mean that everyone should get up and look for actual Easter eggs under their chairs, though that might be fun. Easter eggs in this sense are referring to hidden bits inside movies, games, and yes, even slides. Tell your audience at the start of the slideshow that there are a certain number of Easter eggs hidden within them. You can ask the audience at the end if they found them all. Then, if you're feeling nice, you could show where they were hidden. It's an interactive way to keep the audience engaged and actually paying attention to the slides and your presentation. You can add clues within your speech too. Just be sure your Easter eggs are relevant to the topic and your slideshow. So, how to stop being a boring speaker? Bored audiences can really ruin your experience. They can make you feel terrible about yourself, your speech, or even your career. But you must not take it personally. Many audiences simply start out expecting to be bored, and it has nothing to do with you. Your best bet is to walk into your speech knowing the audience might start out bored or get bored halfway through. Be prepared with the tips I've prepared above, and you'll be much more likely to leave the audience entertained and engaged. Now, if you find this video helpful, then press thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Also, before you go, take a look at the next video you see on the screen right now. Meanwhile, take care.